Hello children, we are discussing the chapter 13, that is sound. In this chapter what we have discussed already, that what is sound? It is the form of energy which travels in the form of vibrations and that enables us to hear. That form of energy is known as sound. How sound is propagated or traveled from one place to another? Sound traveled in the form of vibrations. Sound propagates in the form of vibrations. The particle of media through which sound travels will keep on move back and forth, and that's how they transfer the energy from one particle to another, from another to the next one, and then so on. And that's how the particles keep on transmitting the energy, and sound traveled from one place to, that is from the source of origin to the listener. Next thing bache, we discussed that sound needs a medium to travel. Sound is traveled in the form of waves, and for its traveling, it requires a medium. Sound can travel all the three media, that is solid, liquids and gases. But in these three, the comparison is there. Sound travels in the solids more quickly as compared to the liquids, and it travels more rapidly in the solids as compared to the liquids and gases both. Whereas the speed of sound in the gases is the slowest. Next we have discussed certain properties of sound waves, that is the frequency, amplitude and time period. We discussed this by using a simple pendulum. In this video bache, we will discuss the characteristics of sound. There are three features or characteristics of sound, and those three are written as pitch, loudness and quality. First we'll discuss the pitch. What is pitch bache? It is the property of sound, it is the characteristic of sound by which we can distinguish, we can differentiate, we can make a difference between a shrill and a grave sound, even though those two sounds have same loudness. बच्चों, if we took it in a very simple language, what is it? Pitch क्या है बच्चों? अगर दो sound है जिनकी loudness बिल्कुल same है, जिनकी जो बेहतर loudness means जो energy है वो same है, but हम उन्हें फिर भी differentiate करना चाहते हैं, तो हम उसे कैसे differentiate करेंगे? By pitch. एक sound पतला होता है और एक sound grave होता है, भारी. जैसे बच्चों मेल्स हैव अ ग्रेव साउंड. जो मेल्स होते हैं उनकी आवाज ज्यादा भारी होती है एज कंपेयर टू फीमेल्स. फीमेल्स हैव अ वेरी श्रिल वॉइस, दे हैव अ वेरी सॉफ्ट वॉइस, तीखी आवाज होती है, शार्प वॉइस. दैट इज बिकॉज ऑफ द पिच. सो पिच इज अ प्रॉपर्टी, इज अ कैरेक्टरिस्टिक ऑफ साउंड बाय विच वी कैन डिस्टिंग्विश अ श्रिल साउंड फ्रॉम अ ग्रेव साउंड, even though those two sounds have a same loudness. Pitch of a instrument, pitch of a source depends on its frequency. What is frequency? The number of to and fro, back and forth motions in 1 second is known as frequency. So pitch depends on frequency. It's a very common question beta in your class 8 as well as in your class 9th as well. That on which factor does the pitch depends? The pitch depends on frequency of a source. Frequency of a sound wave produced by a source. High frequency means the pitch of that sound is high and that sound is shrill sound. Low frequency means low pitch, and low pitch means grave sound. भारी आवाज होगी, और shrill means तीखी आवाज होगी बच्चे. There are certain examples of this, which you must have seen in your life, that the voice of small children and women are shrill. छोटे बच्चों की और जो फीमेल्स हैं उनकी आवाज तीखी होती है बच्चे, बिल्कुल पतली होती है. When they shout, वो ज्यादा इरिटेट करती है, because their sound has high frequency. Due to high frequency, their sound has high pitch and the sound will become shrill. Next बच्चे, the wings of bees and mosquitoes. They produce a very sharp sound. Why? Because the frequency of the vibration of their wings is very high. High frequency means their wings produce high pitch, and high pitch means the sound is shrill. Third one is what say? You must have seen a guitar or violin. The strings of guitar and the membrane of tabla. These things are, tightened to change the frequency. During the setup of any, concert, a guitarist always set the strings. There are certain screws at the end. The guitarist will set those strings so that the frequency of the guitar is maintained properly. So those strings, or as well as the membrane of the tabla, is tightened enough by the screws. That tightening will lead to the change in frequency. Next thing, bache, a flute. You must have seen a flute, bache. Flute has certain holes. The change in the number of closed holes will change the frequency. Flute is a very, very, soothing instrument, bache. That flute produces that soothing sound of an appropriate frequency by closing the holes of it. So by closing the holes, the air present in that column of the flute changes, which ultimately changes the frequency and sets the pitch, the appropriate pitch, which produces an appropriate sound. So these are the examples, bache. Rather than this, one example of that is ch-13. What is ch-13, beta? Take 10 to 12 beakers or bowls of different sizes, smaller and then larger than that, then larger, and arrange them in a particular sequence. After that, fill it with the water. Take a stick or take a aluminium rod and hit it. What you will observe that every time you hit a different bowl, the sound, the frequency of the sound produced is different. So ch-13 depends on the pitch. That is because of the different frequencies are produced by the different bowls or containers, and that will produce a different quality of sound. So that is the characteristic of sound, that is pitch, which depends on frequency. Second characteristic of sound which we have to discuss is loudness. It is the characteristic of sound by which we can distinguish a loud sound from a feeble or faint sound, even though those two sounds have same pitch. बच्चों, दो साउंड्स हैं, उनकी पिच सेम है, उनकी फ्रीक्वेंसी सेम है. हम उन साउंड्स को डिफरेंशिएट करना चाहते हैं. द प्रॉपर्टी विच वी यूज टू डिफरेंशिएट देम, विच वी यूज टू डिस्टिंग्विश देम, इज लाउडनेस. So it is the characteristic or property of sound by which we can easily distinguish a loud sound from a faint or feeble sound of same pitch or same frequency. Loudness of a sound wave depends on its amplitude. Pitch depends on frequency and loudness depends on the amplitude, that is energy of sound. Higher the amplitude means the sound is louder, and lower the amplitude, the smaller amplitude, produce a soft sound, a feeble sound. The sounds which have a very smaller amplitude are very soft sounds, they heard very faintly, whereas the sounds with larger amplitude produces a loud sound. You must have, observed the amplifiers placed in the cars or the vehicles. Those amplifiers are used to amplify the sound. They increases the amplitude, bache, and that amplitude increase will lead to the louder sound from the music system which is placed in that automobile. So amplifier is the device used to change the amplitude. That means it is used to make the sound a bit louder than its usual one. Next thing, bache, the other factors which affects the amplitude or loudness are surface area of the object. If the surface area of object is large, surface area means the covering area, that will be large, then the amplitude will be less. Distance of the object, of the source from the listener. More the distance means less energy will reaches to the ears, and we heard a very faint sound. We heard a very feeble sound. But if the distance is less, then we can easily hear the sound. होता है ना बच्चे, whenever we whisper, we used to place our mouth near the ears, beta, so that that feeble sound can be easily heard. We decrease the distance. But if I am standing in front of you and start whispering, these sounds are not heard to you. Why? Because I am whispering, bache. My energy cannot be able to reach the speaker or the mic of this device, this gadget. So that is the distance. Next is motion of the medium. Whenever bache I will starts to move towards the mic, the sound become louder, and when I move away, the sound will slightly fainter. If I move more away from that source, the sound will be more feeble. So on these factors also, loudness of a sound wave depends. But if you have to choose only one out of these four, then the answer would be, the most appropriate answer would be amplitude. The loudness of a sound depends, or measured in a unit. That unit is known as decibel, represented as small d and capital D. So in which unit we measure the loudness or amplitude of sound, that is decibel. We are indirectly measure the amplitude, bache. Actually amplitude is measured in meters, but if a sound's decibels is higher, that means its amplitude is higher, beta. Rustling of leaves produce 10 decibel sound. That is very faint. Rustling means whenever you have seen the leaves bache placed, and whenever air blows, those leaves produce a sound. That is rustling of leaves. That is very faint sound because its loudness is only 10 decibel. Normal conversation is 40 to 60 decibel, and the whispering is of 20 decibel only. Heavy traffic will produce 90 decibel, very loud sound, very irritating, that may even cause any harm to our ears. The jets produce 130 decibel sound, that is very louder and may be harmful for our ears. The earth pneumatic drills, you must have seen the drill which used to dig the earth, that will produce 170 to 180 decibel of sound. So that is also very harmful, very noisy sound, and more loud sound will harm us, will harm our ears. They may break the ear membrane, the tympanic membrane, the eardrum of our ears. So that is the property or the characteristic of sound, that is loudness. Third characteristic of sound which we have to discuss is quality. If we have two sounds of same loudness and same pitch, then what we have to do? What we have to do is, bache, then we use the third characteristic, that is quality. It is the characteristic or the property of sound which we use to distinguish between the two sounds having same loudness and same frequency or pitch. Those two sounds are differentiated on the basis of quality. And quality of a sound depends on the waveform of it. What do you mean by waveform, beta? For example, bache, a fluid produce a waveform like this, whereas a guitar produced a waveform like this. So these two waveforms, the shape of the waves are different, but their frequency and amplitude are same. Then these two sounds can only be distinguished by the help of quality. So if two sounds have same frequency and the same amplitude, then these two are differentiated by the help of quality. It is the characteristic of sound that is used to distinguish between the two sounds having same pitch and same frequency. Sound of single frequency. One frequency is known as a tone. If a sound has one frequency only, its frequency will remain the same. That is known as a tone. You must have observed, bache, in your life that your family members have different voices, but you will easily distinguish their voices from each other. Why? Because the quality of sound produced by each individual is different. So by that quality, you will, easily identify them. Even on the phone as well, you will easily, heard the voice of your father or your mother easily. You can recognize it very easily. Why? Because the quality of their sound is different. Next thing, beta, harmonics. You must have seen various musical instruments in your life. Those instruments produce a very soothing sound, a musical sound. That sound is actually made up of different frequencies. So the sounds or the mixture of sounds of different frequencies is known as harmonics. Harmonics adds richness to the music. It enhances the richness of music. So this is what the harmonics is. Harmonics is used in various songs to enhance its richness, its quality basically. In that music, in that song, you must have heard that various kind of instruments are playing, and you can easily distinguish them, even though those sounds are of same amplitude and same pitch. एक गाना बज रहा है बच्चे, उस गाने में डिफरेंट इंस्ट्रूमेंट्स बज रहे हैं, जबकि उनका एम्पलीट्यूड और पिच सेम है, फिर भी हम आसानी से उनको अलग अलग डिस्टिंग्विश कैसे कर पाते हैं? बिकॉज ऑफ देयर क्वालिटी. So this is the third characteristic of sound, that is quality.